My name is Howard Myers. I'm 74 years old, and I built the house I live in with my own two hands. Every beam, every board, every nail. Last fall, my grandson had me moved into a nursing home. He told the family I was not safe on my own anymore. He told them I had agreed to go, and while I sat in a room that smelled like antiseptic and other people's loneliness, he was 40 miles away showing strangers through my house with a realtor's smile. What Ethan did not know, what nobody in that family thought to check, was that the deed to that house had a clause. A clause my late wife and I signed 12 years ago, sitting in a lawyer's office on a Tuesday afternoon, because we had worked too hard to leave anything to chance. I got the call about what that clause meant at 11:47 on a Wednesday night, not from my lawyer, from his. Before I tell you what happened, take a moment to like and subscribe, and drop your city and local time in the comments. I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to last spring. To the afternoon, everything changed. I moved to Clarksville when I was 26 years old with $200, a second-hand truck, and a set of woodworking tools my father left me when he died. I did not have a plan. I had a piece of land I had bought cheap on the edge of town, and I had hands that knew how to build things. It took me 3 years to finish the house. I poured the foundation myself. I framed every wall. I ran the electrical, which I had to redo twice. And by the time Margaret moved in as my wife in 1977, the place was livable. Though she spent the first 6 months pointing out everything I had done wrong, she was right about most of it. In 1981, she planted an oak sapling in the front yard. It came up to her knee. Now it is taller than the roofline. Margaret died in 2013. Our daughter, Claire, Ethan's mother, had passed 4 years before that, lost to pancreatic cancer at 41. So when Margaret went, it was just me, the house, the tools, and that oak tree she planted. I kept going. I took furniture commissions from people in town. I played chess with my neighbor Dale Whitfield every Friday. I went to church on Sundays. My life had weight and routine and quiet, and I was grateful for all three. Ethan drifted in and out. He would call around the holidays, show up maybe twice a year. He was Claire's son, and I loved him for that. I did not need him to be close. I just needed to know he was alive and decent. I thought he was both. I was wrong about one of those. 3 summers ago, Ethan called from Nashville. He had been let go from a logistics company. Budget cuts, he said. He needed somewhere to land while he figured out his next move. A few months, maybe less. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He was 31 years old and had nowhere to go, and he was the only blood I had left. He showed up with 2 duffel bags and a laptop, and for a while, it was good. He fixed the back fence without being asked. He cooked breakfast on Saturdays. Bad eggs, but I appreciated the effort. We would sit on the porch in the evenings, and he would tell me about Nashville, about the job market, about his plans. I listened. I was glad to have someone in the house again, but then there were small things. He left a banking app open on the kitchen counter once. I was not trying to look, but I saw a balance. Overdrawn. And there was a line item I did not recognize. When I glanced over, he closed the laptop fast and changed the subject. Then he started asking questions. Who had I left the house to? Did I have a will? What might a place like this go for now, with the market the way it was? He framed it as concern. Planning ahead. Making sure I was taken care of. I told him I had handled those things years ago, and he did not need to worry. He smiled and nodded. Dale noticed before I did. He pulled me aside one Friday evening after chess. Howard, he said, that grandson of yours asks me a lot of questions about your property. I told him Ethan was just curious. I told myself the same thing. By the second year, the concern had become something else. Ethan started rearranging the routines. He said it was for my safety. I should not drive after dark anymore. Too many deer on the county roads. I did not need to go to the hardware store myself. He would pick up whatever I needed. He would handle the grocery run on Thursdays so I could rest. Each thing by itself seemed reasonable. Together, they added up to something that felt less like help and more like management. He started talking about me differently around other people. I found out from Jim Bellows, a distant cousin of mine who passed through town in October, that Ethan had mentioned to him that I had been having a few episodes, left the stove on, gotten confused driving home from church. None of it was true. Not a word of it. When I confronted Ethan, he looked genuinely hurt. Grandpa, I'm just trying to be honest with people so they understand what we are dealing with. I told him there was nothing to deal with. He apologized, said he had been worried and maybe overstated things. 2 days later, I came home to find him walking room to room with his phone raised, photographing everything, the kitchen, the living room, the oak tree through the front window, the workshop in the back. What are you doing? I asked. He turned around with that easy smile. Just keeping memories, Grandpa. This place means a lot to me. I looked at him for a long moment, then I went inside. I let it go. I told myself it was nothing. That was my first mistake. I need to tell you about a Tuesday afternoon in November of 2013. Margaret had been diagnosed 3 months earlier. Same cancer that took Claire, though we did not say that out loud. She was still sharp, still herself. But she had started doing the things people do when they can see the end of the road. Making lists. Having conversations she had put off for years. Going through paperwork with the careful attention of someone who would not get a second chance to get it right. She asked me to call Arthur Beam. He had been our family lawyer for nearly 30 years. He had handled everything from the deed when I first bought the land to Claire's estate. I trusted him the way I trusted my own tools, completely and without needing to understand everything about how they worked. The three of us sat in Arthur's office. Margaret had a yellow notepad. She had written down what she wanted before we arrived. She wanted a life estate clause in the deed. She explained it to me simply. As long as I was alive, no one could sell that house. No one could mortgage it. No one could transfer it or encumber it without my written consent. The house was mine until I was gone. Legally. Permanently. With no exceptions. Arthur walked us through it. Margaret asked clarifying questions. I signed where they told me to sign. You understand what this means? Arthur asked me. She does, I said. That is enough for me. We stopped at the diner on the way home. Margaret ordered peach pie and ate the whole slice, which she had not done in months. She seemed lighter. I put the deed in a cedar box I had made the previous winter. I set it in the top drawer of my dresser. I did not think about it again for 11 years. Brenda Calloway showed up on a Saturday in late February. She was Ethan's great-aunt on his father's side. A woman I had met 4 or 5 times over the years and had no strong feelings about either way. Ethan said she was just passing through. She stayed for dinner. She was pleasant at the table. After I cleared the dishes, I stepped out to the workshop to check on a cabinet I had drying. And through the screen door, I heard the two of them on the back porch. You see how he repeats himself? Ethan was saying. He told the same story about the Hendersons twice tonight. Brenda's voice was lower. How long has that been going on? Months, Ethan said. I am the only one watching out for him. I stood very still in the workshop. Maybe it is time to think about a proper arrangement, Brenda said. Somewhere with staff. I went back inside and washed the glasses. I did not say a word about what I had heard. The next morning, I sat down with Ethan at the kitchen table. I told him, calmly and directly, that I was in full possession of my faculties, that I had not repeated the Henderson story, that I had mentioned them once, and that I did not want him making assessments of my mental state to other family members. Ethan said he was sorry. He said he was scared and overcorrecting. He reached across the table and put his hand on mine. I believed him, or I wanted to. A week later, I got a call from my doctor's office. Someone had scheduled a cognitive evaluation for me. The caller confirmed the appointment had been booked by my emergency contact, Ethan Calloway. I canceled it and called Ethan immediately. I set a boundary, I told him. Do not cross it again. He said he understood. I came home from a routine checkup on a Tuesday afternoon in March. Nothing remarkable about the appointment. Blood pressure fine, cholesterol in range. The doctor said to keep doing what I was doing. There were 2 cars in my driveway when I pulled in. Ethan's truck and a silver sedan I did not recognize. Brenda's rental. There was a third person inside. A woman named Patricia from Meadow Creek Care Center. She had a folder on her lap. She stood when I walked in. Ethan spoke first. He had rehearsed it. I could tell by the way he barely paused between sentences. He said the family had been worried for some time. He said living alone was not safe for me anymore. He said they had found a good place, very clean, good staff, not far. He said everything had been arranged. You agreed to this, he said, and held out a single sheet of paper. I looked at it. It was a form I had signed. I recognized my own handwriting. Ethan had brought it to me 2 weeks earlier in the evening, along with a stack of papers he said were for supplemental Medicare coverage. He had pointed to where I needed to sign. I signed. I had not read every page. The form said, Voluntary admission to long-term care facility. Brenda stood in the corner with her arms folded. Patricia from Meadow Creek looked at the floor. I could have argued. I could have called Arthur Beam on the spot. I could have thrown all 3 of them out of my house and dared them to come back with a court order. But I looked at Ethan's face, at the calculation behind the practiced concern, and I made a decision. I went to my bedroom. I packed 1 bag, shirts, pants, my reading glasses, and my keys, which I slipped into my inside jacket pocket. I also opened the top dresser drawer and took out the cedar box. I set it at the bottom of the bag under the shirts. Ethan did not know the box existed. He had no reason to look for it. When I came back out, I said nothing. I let them think I was giving up. Room 14 at Meadow Creek had a window that looked out over the parking lot. There was a television mounted too high on the wall, and a roommate on the other side of a curtain who slept most of the day. The sheets were clean, the staff were polite, the food was warm. I was not there because I needed to be. I did not make a scene on the first day or the second. I introduced myself to the staff calmly. I ate in the dining room. I asked for a pen and a notepad, and I started writing down everything I could remember. Dates. What Ethan had said. What Brenda had said. The form I had signed. The appointments he had made without asking. On the 3rd day, a woman knocked on my open door. Sandra Pruitt, the resident services coordinator. She had gray hair, cut short, and reading glasses on a lanyard. She asked how I was settling in. I am fine, I said. I should not be here. She sat down. She did not argue or reassure me. She just said, "Tell me what you mean by that." I told her all of it. She listened without interrupting once. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Are you in contact with your attorney?" she asked. I told her Arthur Beam had retired, but he had passed his clients to a woman named Carol Denton. I had not spoken to her in years. "I can help you make that call," Sandra said. She brought me the phone. She stepped outside and closed the door. I sat in that room with the parking lot view and dialed a number I had not used in a decade. 40 miles away, I knew Ethan was walking through my house with a realtor. He had no idea what was sitting in that cedar box in my bedroom drawer. Ethan moved fast. I will give him that. Within a week of dropping me at Meadow Creek, he had an appointment with Janet Holloway at Clarksville Realty. Janet was 60, experienced, and knew the residential market in Montgomery County better than anyone. She walked through the house and came back with a number. $278,000. A reasonable price for the area, she said. Decent condition for its age. Ethan said he wanted to close in 60 days. Janet said she would need the deed and full documentation. Ethan went back to the house. He checked the filing cabinet in the hall closet, the kitchen junk drawer, the top of the bedroom dresser. The dresser drawer was empty. He did not know why, and he did not notice that something was missing from it. He found what he was looking for in the filing cabinet. A folded photocopy of the deed, the kind you keep as a reference while the original sits somewhere safer. He saw his grandfather's name at the top. He saw the property description, the legal language, the date. He did not read page 3. He photographed the copy and emailed it to Janet. Janet forwarded it to the buyer's attorney, a man named Greg Harmon, who had been handling property law in Nashville for 22 years. Ethan, meanwhile, called his own lawyer, a young man he had found online, not well versed in elder law, who told him the plan was manageable as long as Ethan had either a signed power of attorney or proof of his grandfather's incapacity. Ethan had neither, but he told the lawyer he could get them. In room 14 at Meadow Creek, I had just finished a call with Carol Denton. She had pulled up Arthur Beam's records from our 2013 filing. She read the life estate clause to me over the phone, word for word. Then she said, "Howard, no one can sell this house without your signature." I said, "I know. I just needed to hear it from someone else." Carol Denton had taken over Arthur Beam's practice 4 years earlier. She was in her late 40s, thorough, with a dry phone manner that I immediately respected. She did not add words she did not need. She confirmed everything. The clause Margaret had insisted on in 2013 was still fully active. Under Tennessee property law, a life estate with a retained interest means the life tenant, me, holds the legal right to occupy, use, and control the property until death. No sale, no mortgage, no transfer of any kind is valid without my written consent. A photocopy of the deed means nothing without the original, and even with the original, Ethan's name was not on it as any kind of authorized party. "He would need a power of attorney from you," Carol said, "or a guardianship order from a court. Does he have either?" "No. Then any contract he signs is unenforceable. The buyer's attorney will catch it during title review." I asked Carol what she thought I should do about it. She said we had options. She could send a cease and desist to Ethan immediately. We could notify the real estate agent. We could file an injunction. I said, "No, not yet." She paused. "Why not?" I thought about how to explain it. Because if I stopped him now, he would walk away. He would make up some story. The family would believe him, not me. I needed him in a room where there was no story he could tell. Carol was quiet for a moment. "You want to let him get far enough that there is no walking it back." "I want him to sign a contract," I said. "Then I want to show everyone in that room what he signed it on." Carol said she would be ready when I was. I said I would call her in 2 weeks. Dale Whitfield found out I was at Meadow Creek, the way people in small towns find things out. Someone mentioned it to someone else at the post office, and it got back to him before the week was out. He showed up on a Thursday afternoon with a tin of shortbread cookies. I had the cedar box already. I had packed it the day I left, tucked under my shirts where no one thought to look. But I had not told Dale that yet. He did not know I had brought it with me, and I liked it that way. He set the cookies on the table between us, and we went outside to the patio east of the main wing. Dale beat me at chess twice, which was unusual. I was distracted. After the second game, he said, "You know that boy of yours has been talking to Janet Holloway?" "I know. You planning on doing something about it?" "Yes," Dale nodded slowly. He did not push for more. That was one of the things I had always valued about him. He understood that some plans worked better, quiet. Before he left, I told him what I needed. He still had a key to the house for emergencies. I asked him to check on the place every few days. Make sure nothing was being removed, nothing changed. Not to confront Ethan, just to watch. "And if I see something worth noting?" Dale asked. "Write it down," I said. "Date and time." He put on his jacket. "Already started." "Dale?" I said. He turned at the door. "Do not mention the box to anyone." "Not yet," he said. "What box?" I almost smiled. 3 weeks after I arrived at Meadow Creek, Ethan held a dinner at my house. He had not asked me. He had not mentioned it. I found out afterward from Jim Bellows, who had been invited along with a few other distant relatives. Cousins twice removed. People who knew my name but had not seen me in years. Ethan cooked. He poured wine. And at some point in the evening, according to Jim, he explained the situation. The way Ethan told it, I had decided, willingly, thoughtfully, that selling the house made sense. The upkeep was too much. Meadow Creek was comfortable. I wanted to leave Ethan something while I still could, a kind of living legacy, and this was the responsible choice for everyone. Brenda, sitting at my dining room table, confirmed all of it. She said I had seemed at peace with the decision when she visited. No one asked to call me. No one drove the 40 minutes to Meadow Creek to hear it from my mouth. Jim told me later he had felt uneasy, that he had started to say something and then let it go because he did not want to cause trouble. I should have spoken up, Jim said when he finally reached me by phone a few days later. I knew something was not right. You are speaking up now, I told him. That counts. He asked if there was anything he could do. I said not yet, but I told him to remember what he had witnessed. The dinner. Who was there? What Ethan had said. Jim said he would remember. I had one trusted neighbor watching quietly. I had the original deed safe. I had a lawyer standing by, and now I had a witness who had been in that room. What I needed next was a room of my own. Greg Harmon had closed more than 400 property transactions. He read every deed, not the summary, not the cover sheet, every page. He received the photocopy Ethan had provided on a Wednesday morning. The buyers were a young couple, first-time homeowners, eager to be in by summer. Greg had done work for their family before. He was thorough on their behalf as a matter of principle. He got to page 3. He read the clause twice. Then he called Janet Holloway. The grantor on this deed is Howard Myers, he said. Is Mr. Myers the seller? Janet said no. The seller was Ethan Calloway, the grandson. Is Mr. Myers deceased? Janet said no. He was in a care facility. Greg set down the document. Then we have a problem. This deed has a life estate clause. It is retained by Howard Myers. Ethan Calloway has no legal authority to sell this property while Mr. Myers is alive unless he holds a valid power of attorney or there is a court order establishing guardianship. Ethan had presented himself as handling his grandfather's affairs. Greg said he needed to speak with Ethan's representation directly, and he needed documentation, the power of attorney, or proof of a guardianship proceeding. Without one of those, he would not allow his clients to proceed. Janet called Ethan. I was not there for that call, but I heard about it later. Ethan told her he had a power of attorney. He said he would send it over. He did not have one. He had never had one. He had 72 hours before Greg's deadline and no way to meet it honestly. He came on a Saturday, no call ahead. He walked into room 14 with a brown envelope under his arm and the practiced smile I had spent 2 years learning to read. He sat in the chair across from my bed like he was stopping by to visit. He asked how I was sleeping, whether the food was any good, whether I needed him to bring anything next time. I said I was fine. Then he opened the envelope and set a single sheet of paper on the table between us. A power of attorney form already filled in. All it needed was my signature and a notary, which he said the facility could provide. It is just to help manage your accounts, he said. Pay the care bills. Handle the utilities while the house is on the market. You do not want those things falling behind. I picked up the form. I read it. It granted Ethan full authority over my financial and property decisions, real estate included. I set it back down. Ethan, I said, are you selling my house? He held my gaze. We talked about this, Grandpa. You agreed. I did not agree to anything. I signed a paper you put in front of me and called something else. Something shifted in his face just for a second. Then the concern came back. I am trying to take care of you, he said. I know what you are trying to do. I slid the form back across the table. I will not sign this. He picked it up slowly. He stood. At the door, he paused, but he did not turn around. His hands were not quite steady when he folded the envelope. That evening, I called Carol Denton. I told her it was time to start moving. Carol came to Meadow Creek the following Tuesday. She was businesslike. Notepad, a folder, low heels, reading glasses she kept pushing up. She sat across from me at the small table in room 14, and we worked through the situation the way you work through a complicated piece of joinery, one joint at a time, making sure everything is square before you move forward. She said if Ethan pursued a competency challenge, we needed to be ahead of it. She had already arranged for an independent neuropsychologist to administer a standard cognitive assessment, not the facility's own staff. An outside evaluator with no connection to Meadow Creek or to Ethan. I took the test that afternoon. It took 90 minutes. Memory, reasoning, language, problem solving. The evaluator said he was not permitted to share results directly, but he told Carol the following day, no impairment of any clinical significance. Full legal capacity intact. Carol filed the results with her office. If Ethan moved for guardianship, we had the paperwork to stop it immediately. She also reviewed my admission paperwork from Meadow Creek. As she suspected, my original intake form was voluntary, which meant I had the legal right to discharge myself at any time. No court order was needed. Ethan had no standing to prevent it. You can leave today if you want, she said. Not yet, I told her. She looked at me over her glasses. I said, Greg Harmon is going to need me in a room. I want to be there on my own terms, not running out the door. I want Ethan to think he still has time to fix this before I walk in. Carol wrote something in her notepad. I will contact Harmon's office this week. Good, I said, and tell him to invite everyone. The week before the meeting, Ethan's plan started coming apart at the seams. His attorney, the young man he had hired online, called to deliver the news about the competency route. An independent assessment had already been filed with Carol Denton's office. Howard Myers, age 74, was in full possession of his legal faculties. Any guardianship petition would be contested immediately, and given the existing documentation, a judge was unlikely to grant even a preliminary hearing inside of 4 months. Ethan did not have 4 months. His debt collector had sent a final notice. 38 days. The same day, Greg Harmon's office contacted Ethan's attorney directly. The message was clear. The transaction could not move forward. The life estate clause was clear. Unless Howard Myers appeared in person to provide written consent, or a valid, witnessed, properly executed power of attorney was produced, Greg would not certify the title, and the buyers would withdraw. A photocopy of a deed with a retained life estate was not a clean title. No reputable attorney would let his clients close on it. Ethan sat in the parking lot of Meadow Creek that evening. I know because Sandra mentioned seeing a truck idling near the east entrance for a long time before it finally pulled away. I was inside at the small table, eating a dinner I had grown accustomed to not enjoying, thinking about what the next week would bring. Carol called that night with the confirmation. Greg Harmon had agreed to host the meeting at his office. Thursday, 2 o'clock. All parties were notified. Ethan's attorney told him to come prepared to explain himself. I do not know what Ethan was thinking that night, but I suspect he was beginning to understand that there was no version of this where he came out ahead. Dale picked me up on Thursday morning, 2 hours before the meeting. I had laid out my clothes the night before. The flannel shirt Margaret always said made me look trustworthy. Dark slacks. My good boots, the ones I had resoled twice rather than replacing because the leather had shaped itself to my feet over 30 years. I asked Sandra to hold my room until the afternoon. She did not ask why. She just said she would. Dale drove without talking much. I was glad for that. There is a kind of quiet between two people who have known each other long enough that they do not need to fill the air. Carol met us in the parking lot outside Greg Harmon's building. She reviewed the plan briefly. She would place the original deed on the table, establish my presence and my competency on record, and allow Greg to read the relevant clause. Nothing dramatic. The document would do the work. You understand the room is going to be uncomfortable, she said. I said I had built houses in 100-degree summers. I could handle an uncomfortable room. She almost smiled. We went inside. Greg's assistant showed us to the conference room. There was already a cluster of people at the far end of the hallway. Janet, a young couple I did not recognize, a man in a suit who I assumed was Ethan's attorney, and then Ethan. He was standing with his back to the door when I walked in. Brenda was beside him. When he turned and saw me, the color left his face so fast it looked like someone had pulled a shade. He said nothing. I nodded, walked to my chair, and sat down. Before I tell you what happened in that office, I need to stop for a second. Because right now, recording this, I keep thinking about how many people are sitting in a room somewhere convinced that staying quiet is the same thing as staying safe. It is not. It means you are waiting for the wrong moment. The right moment is before they finish signing. If that hits something in you, if someone has ever tried to make a decision about your life without asking, leave a comment below. Tell me what happened. I want to hear from you. Now, let me tell you about that conference room. Greg Harmon ran a quiet office. The conference room had a long table, 8 chairs, a window that faced the street, and nothing on the walls except a framed copy of the Tennessee bar license. His assistant sat in the corner with a legal pad. Greg introduced himself to the room, thanked everyone for coming, and stated his purpose plainly. There was a discrepancy in the title documentation that had to be resolved before the transaction could proceed. The buyers, a couple in their early 30s, the wife visibly tense, sat across from Janet Holloway. Ethan and his attorney sat at the near end. Brenda had positioned herself slightly behind Ethan, close enough to the wall that she could avoid eye contact with most of the room. Carol and I sat together. Dale had stayed in the lobby. Ethan's attorney spoke first. He said his client was acting as the authorized party on behalf of his grandfather, who had voluntarily entered care. Carol did not raise her voice. She just placed the canvas bag on the table. She reached in and set the cedar box in the center of the table. The attorney stopped mid-sentence. Carol lifted the lid. She removed the original deed, not a photocopy, the original, notarized and recorded with the county seal, and slid it across to Greg Harmon. No one spoke. Greg put on his reading glasses. He turned to page 3. The room stayed quiet except for the soft turn of paper and, somewhere outside, a car going past. Ethan set his phone face down on the table. His jaw was tight. I sat with my hands flat on the table and waited. The cedar box sat in the middle of the room like a fact no one could argue with. Greg Harmon read the clause once to himself. Then he read it aloud. Life estate, retained by Howard R. Myers, grantor. Said life estate shall remain in full force and effect during the natural life of the grantor. No conveyance, sale, or encumbrance of the property shall be valid or enforceable without the express written consent of the life tenant. Said clause shall survive any subsequent transfer of the remainderment interest. He set the deed down. He looked at Ethan's attorney. This clause is valid and on record with Montgomery County. Mr. Myers is the life tenant. He is present in this room. He has not provided written consent to any sale. Ethan's attorney said, "We can establish." "I have reviewed the competency documentation," Carol said. She placed a second folder on the table. "An independent evaluation conducted 11 days ago. Mr. Myers is in full legal possession of his faculties. There is no guardianship order. There is no valid power of attorney." Greg looked at the young couple. They looked at each other. The wife reached under the table and found her husband's hand. "I cannot certify this title," Greg said. "This transaction cannot proceed." The room held still for a moment. Then Ethan pushed back his chair. "He agreed to this," he said, and his voice had gone thin. "He told me he wanted." "Ethan." My voice was even. It did not need to be loud. He stopped. I looked at him across the table. This boy who had come to me with 2 duffel bags and a laptop, who had eaten my food and repaired my fence, and then decided that my life was an obstacle to his. "Your grandmother put that clause on this deed," I said, "because she knew what this house was worth protecting. I think she understood people a little better than either of us." Ethan sat back down. He said nothing more. The buyer's attorney leaned toward the couple and said something quiet. The wife nodded. They began gathering their things. Carol produced the last document. A single page, formal refusal of sale, stating that Howard R. Myers, as life tenant, explicitly declined to authorize the transaction. I signed it. My handwriting was still steady. It had always been steady. Greg signed as a witness. His assistant dated it and initialed the margin. Ethan watched all of this. His attorney had stopped taking notes. Then Ethan stood up again. His chair scraped the floor. His voice came out with the controlled desperation of a man who had been holding something back too long. "You know where I am right now? I am about to lose everything. I owe $67,000 to people who are not patient. That house was the only way out. I have been watching out for you for 2 years. You have been living in my house for 2 years," I said. The room was very quiet, and watching out for me looked like booking a cognitive evaluation without my permission. It looked like telling family members I had memory problems I do not have. It looked like putting a form in front of me at night and calling it something else. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. "I know you were desperate. That is real. But you did not come to me and say you were in trouble. You came to me and took." Brenda stood. She started to say something about intentions, about family, about how everyone had just been trying to help. Greg Harmon said plainly, "I would ask everyone to allow the parties to conclude this appropriately." Brenda sat back down. The buyer said a quiet goodbye to Greg and left without looking at Ethan. Janet Holloway left without a word. Ethan's attorney leaned in close to him and said something low. Ethan nodded once, mechanically. I capped my pen and put it in my pocket. Small towns do not need social media to spread news. They just need an afternoon and a few phone calls. Janet Holloway was back at her office by 4 o'clock. By 5 o'clock, 3 people in her professional network knew there had been a title dispute on a property in the southeast part of town. A life estate clause, an unauthorized seller. A transaction stopped in the room. By evening, the story had reached the hardware store, the diner on 5th Street, and the chess club that met Thursday evenings at the library. Greg Harmon's office prepared a formal record of the proceeding. Ethan Calloway had presented himself as an authorized seller of a property he did not have the legal right to sell. The documentation would remain on file. If any subsequent transaction involving that property came across Greg's desk, or any attorney in his network, they would require verified authority before proceeding. Sandra Pruitt got a call from Carol Denton late that afternoon. Sandra told me about it later. She said she had laughed, which surprised her because she did not usually laugh at work. Before I left the parking lot, I needed to say one more thing to Ethan. Not to wound him. Not to get the last word. There is a difference between the two, and I wanted to know I had kept that distinction. He was standing by his truck when I caught up to him. Dale was 20 feet away, waiting by the car. I walked over alone. Ethan was looking at the ground when I reached him. He had aged 10 years and 4 hours. I stopped a few feet away. Not close enough for it to be intimate. Far enough that it was clear this was a statement, not a conversation. "Ethan," I said, "you are Claire's son. That is not nothing to me. It never will be." He kept looking at the ground. "But you are not welcome in that house. Not now, and not while I am living in it. That is not something I am saying out of anger. Anger would be easier, honestly. This is just what is true." He finally looked up. His eyes were red at the edges. I did not know what else to do. "I know, and I am sorry you were in that position. I meant it. But you did not come to me. You did not say you were in trouble. You decided what to do with my home, and then arranged the world around that decision. I cannot make room for someone who does that." He did not argue. Maybe there was nothing left to argue. Get out of debt the hard way, I said. Ask for help from someone who can actually give it. Build something you own. I paused. Your mother would have told you the same thing. I turned and walked back toward Dale's car. I did not look over my shoulder. Not because I was being dramatic about it. Just because there was nothing back there I needed to see. Dale had the car running. He handed me a coffee from the cup holder. It had gone lukewarm, but I drank it anyway. He said, "You okay?" I said, "I will be better tomorrow." He nodded and pulled out of the lot. That evening, back at Meadow Creek for the last time, Jim Bellows called. "I heard," he said. "You all right?" "Getting there," I said. "You coming home?" I looked at the cedar box on the table beside my bed. The original deed was back inside it. I had checked twice. "Tomorrow," I said. The week that followed was quiet, the way things get quiet after a hard wind. Greg Harmon filed his record of the proceeding with the county. The notation was straightforward. Attempted sale of a property with a retained life estate by a party without legal authority. No formal charges were filed. The standard for attempted real estate deception required evidence of intent to deceive a buyer, and the buyers had pulled out before the closing. But the record existed. Anyone doing a title search on the property going forward would find it. Ethan's attorney sent a final invoice for $3,200 and closed the file. The debt collectors were not interested in legal proceedings. They wanted cash. Without the house sale, Ethan had no clear way to produce it, and they began pursuing him directly. Calls, letters, then a collections attorney of their own. Janet Holloway removed Ethan from her contact list. She had built her reputation over years on clean transactions. His name was now associated with a clouded title situation. And in a market where a realtor's credibility is everything, that association cost something she was not willing to pay. There was no dramatic scene, no arrest, no public humiliation beyond what had already happened in that conference room. Ethan's consequences were the natural result of what he had attempted. A door closed here, an avenue blocked there. Debt pressing in from every direction. With no exit he had manufactured still available to him. I did not check on him. That was not cruelty. It was clarity about my role. I had said what I needed to say. What came next for Ethan was his to navigate. Some problems you cause, you have to get out of yourself. Brenda called on a Saturday evening, a week and a half after the meeting. I was in the workshop sanding a set of cabinet doors I had been putting off since before all of this started. I answered on the third ring. She started with the standard things. How was I feeling? Was I settled back in? She hoped the whole business had not been too hard on me. Her voice had a brittle quality, like she was reading from a prepared script and could hear how it sounded. I let her finish. Then I said, "Brenda, you sat in my living room and told Ethan's story about what I wanted. You did not call. You did not drive out to Meadow Creek once in 6 weeks." Silence. "I am not saying you are a bad person," I said. "I think you heard a version of events that you wanted to believe. Maybe because you thought there would be something in it for you, or maybe because it was easier than asking hard questions. I do not know which. Either way, you made a choice, and I know what it was." She said she was sorry. She said she had not known the full situation. "You knew enough to not check," I said. "That is what I mean." She started to cry. I waited. After a moment, she said she hoped we could move past this. "I am not angry with you, Brenda, but we do not have the kind of relationship where we move past things. We barely had a relationship to start with." I told her to take care of herself. I said goodnight. I hung up and went back to the cabinet door. The grain was fine and close. I had known it would be when I picked the board. Dale drove me home the next morning. It was the kind of April day that comes in without asking, the light pale gold, the air cool, with just enough warmth underneath it to tell you the season had turned. The oak tree was putting out its first leaves, that bright new green that only lasts a week before the canopy thickens and the color deepens. We pulled into the driveway, and I sat there for a moment. "Take your time," Dale said. I got out. I stood in the yard and looked at the house. The roofline I had set 40 years ago, the porch I had rebuilt twice, the workshop in the back that held more tools than any one man needed. Nothing had been taken out. Ethan had gotten as far as showing the place and nothing further. I took out my keys, the same set I had pocketed on that Tuesday afternoon in March, when Ethan had stood in my living room with Patricia from Meadow Creek and told me he had arranged my life. The front door opened the way it always had, with a slight stick at the top of the jamb that I had never bothered to plane down because Margaret said she liked hearing it. Like knowing when I came in from the workshop late, I stepped inside. The house smelled like itself. Old wood and linseed oil and the particular quiet of a place that has been standing in the same spot for 4 decades. I walked to the bedroom. I set the canvas bag on the dresser. I reached in past the shirts and lifted out the cedar box. It had been at the bottom of that bag since the day I left. I opened it and placed the deed back in its usual position, folded flat under the velvet insert. Then I set the box in the top drawer where it had always lived. Then I sat down on the edge of the bed. I did not cry. I had made that decision somewhere around week 3 at Meadow Creek, and I kept it. But I sat there for a few minutes in the stillness, and I said, "Thank you," out loud to the empty room, to whoever it is that receives that kind of thing. I think she heard it. I have had people ask me since this happened, Howard, why did you not stop him sooner? Why did you let it go that far? And my answer is always the same. Because I wanted him to understand exactly what he had done. Not from me telling him, from sitting in a room full of people while the truth read itself out loud. If this story stayed with you, if you have ever watched someone try to rewrite your life without your permission, hit that subscribe button. I put something out every week, and it is always free. Now, the last part. The week I came home, I called Carol Denton and told her I wanted to put the deed in better order. We met at her office on a Wednesday afternoon. She walked me through the options. I added Jim Bellows as the executor of my estate. He was the one person in the extended family who noticed something was wrong and said so, even quietly. That was worth something. We updated the documentation to reflect my current wishes, added a secondary attorney on file in case Carol retired, and made sure the original deed was registered at the county in digital format as well as physical. It took 2 hours. I left feeling like a man who had just serviced an engine that was running fine, but deserved the attention. Back home, I started taking commissions again. A woman on the north side of town wanted a dining table for 8. A family over by the park needed built-ins for a study. Small jobs, the kind I could finish in a week or two. The workshop filled back up with the smell of sawdust and the particular satisfaction of work that has a clear end. Sandra Pruitt stopped by in May. She had seen the dining table commission mentioned in the local paper, a short piece about craftsmen in the county, 3 or 4 names. She bought a small side table I had sitting finished in the workshop for a month. She paid full price without negotiating and told me to keep the business card in case Meadow Creek needed anything made. Dale and I moved our chess games back to my porch. We played on Friday evenings the way we always had, with a thermos of coffee and whatever the evening brought. Some things, when they come back, fit exactly where they left. People have been asking me since I started talking about this, why share it? Partly because it helps to say it out loud, but mostly because I think there are people listening to this who are somewhere in the middle of something similar. Maybe as the person being managed, maybe as the adult child watching it happen to a parent. And I want to say a few things plainly. Let me handle it and let me decide are not the same thing. They sound the same when someone says them with concern in their voice. They are not the same thing. Getting older does not mean you lose the right to make your own decisions. It does not mean your signature is worthless. It does not mean the papers you have accumulated over a lifetime, the deeds and the wills and the things you thought through carefully with people you trusted, stop mattering. They matter more. They are the shape of everything you built. I was not a perfect grandfather. I let things go too long because I did not want to believe what I was seeing. Trusting family is not a flaw, but it has to be tempered with paying attention. I stopped paying attention for a while, and it cost me 6 weeks in a room with a view of a parking lot. I am not bitter about it. Bitterness would mean it had broken something. It did not. What I am is clearer about who I trust, about what I am willing to accommodate, about the difference between someone who wants to help you and someone who wants to arrange you. Those are not the same thing either. If you have old paperwork in a drawer, deeds, wills, powers of attorney, go look at it. Know what it says. Make sure it still reflects what you want. Your past self may have been wiser than you remember. The morning after I came home, I woke before sunrise. I made coffee in the kitchen the way I have made it for 50 years. Grounds measured by hand, water brought just off the boil. 5 minutes of patience. Margaret always said I made the best coffee of anyone she knew, and I always said it was just a matter of not rushing it. I took the mug out to the front porch. The oak tree was there. It fills the whole left side of the yard now, the canopy wider than the house, the trunk about as thick as I can get both arms around. It was knee-high when Margaret planted it in 1981. She picked that spot because it would shade the porch in summer without blocking the morning light in winter. She thought about things like that, long-term, patiently, without making a production of it. I sat in my chair on the porch and drank my coffee and watched the light come up through the branches. There are things you build with your hands, and there are things you build with time. Decisions made quietly, carefully, in the ordinary course of a life that you will not need for years and may forget you made until you need them. That deed was sitting in a cedar box for 11 years. It was there the whole time. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment below. I want to know. Have you ever had someone try to make a decision about your home, your money, your future without asking? Did it get resolved? Are you still in it? Tell me. And if you are looking for more, there are 2 stories in the description that I think you will want to hear. Both of them are about ordinary people who held the line when letting go would have been easier. I will see you there.